So Apple could owe Samsung hundreds of millions of dollars, but why? So a reputable Korean source called ET News has said that Apple needs to pay hundreds of billions of won to Samsung Display. Now, as a point of reference, 100 billion won is about 86.5 million US dollars, and the quote is translated from Korean, so it may not be 100% accurate. But before we get into all of that, let's just backtrack a little bit to Apple's history, recent history. So, up until 2017, all of Apple displays, including the ones on the iPhones, iPads, and MacBooks, have had LCD displays. But in 2017 November, Apple released the iPhone X, and the iPhone X was their first device to have an OLED panel. Now, Apple designed the panel, they calibrated it, but they needed someone to manufacture it, so they went into a partnership with Samsung. So Samsung signed a contract with Apple to manufacture their OLED displays. So the 6th generation flexible display produced by Samsung was calibrated by Apple and then manufactured by Samsung. So before the iPhone X was released, Apple and Samsung formed a contract so that Samsung could provide Apple with their flexible OLED technology for use in their iPhones and future models of anything that Apple makes a design for. So Samsung Display was said to have invested into a custom A3 display facility, which was exclusive to Apple for at least a couple of years. Now, predictions indicated that Samsung was meant to produce about 100 million OLED panels for the iPhone per year. Now that's a lot, but not when you consider how many iPhones have been sold to that date. But as we know, smartphone sales declined recently in the last couple of years, especially for the flagship tier. So the iPhone X failed to meet any of its sale targets, and it wasn't the only phone to do that in that year. Many flagships have been going down and down in market share because they are so expensive, and so many mid-tier phones have flagship features and are more affordable. And in general, people seem to be upgrading their phones less and less, so they'll keep it for at least 2 years in most cases. So there wasn't really a need for people to upgrade a phone. And with the iPhone XS last year, those sales targets weren't met either. And because of that, Apple had to slow down their orders to the Samsung facility. Now, it was reported that the A3 facility has had less than 50% utilization in the recent years, and at one point it was down to just 10% utilization. Now, that meant that at that point, 90% of the facility was unused, so that was money being wasted and money that was coming from Samsung. And as a result of this, Samsung Display saw a massive drop in their revenue. Now, it wasn't just because of Apple, the shipments to the iPhone. It was because of Samsung Mobile, it was because of many other companies whose orders had just dropped because there wasn't a demand for it anymore. Now, in 2017, the operating profit was 5.7 trillion won, and in 2018, it had dropped to less than half of that at 2.62 trillion won. Now, that was a drop of 54% in just 1 year, and since then, it's likely to have gone down even more. Now, because of that, because there was a contract in place that Samsung would have an exclusive facility for Apple to produce for their iPhones, and the demand wasn't met, but Samsung lost a lot of money, Samsung wants to recuperate that somehow. They want to get it back. But how are they going to do that? Now, what can we take away from this? What will Apple do? Well, one very unlikely scenario is that Apple will pay a cash sum to Samsung for the amount that is lost. But that's very unlikely. Now, an industry official said that we know that Apple has offered multiple options to Samsung Display, including conditions for adopting OLEDs for other products, such as tablets and notebooks. Now, if we think about it, Apple has 3 major product lines. They have the iPhones, the iPads, and then the MacBooks. Now, in terms of these 2 sections, I'm just going to refer to the iPad Pro and the MacBook Pro. Now, the reason I'm just going to refer to the iPad Pro and not the other iPads is because the other iPads aren't really Apple's focus for the premium technology, and OLED is a premium technology. The iPad Pro is Apple's only product to use their ProMotion technology, which lets the screen run at 120Hz, and that shows that Apple does care about the iPad Pro display more than their MacBook displays and more than the other iPads. Now, OLED is a premium technology, as we know, and it costs more than LCDs, so it makes sense for Apple to add it into a premium iPad rather than the entry-level iPad. Now, the iPad Pro's display is unique for Apple. It's the only one they produce which runs at up to 120Hz using the Apple ProMotion technology. Now, if we look at it closely, we can see that it's targeted towards 2 main sectors, the media creation and media consumption. But media creation, people who work in that sector, people who are graphic designers, who use Photoshop, who use Apple Pencil, who do video editing on the iPad, they want to work in their color space. They want access to the sRGB color space. They want a P3 color gamut. They would like 8-bit color, 10-bit color. And for them, the iPad Pro is a device which can do as much as a laptop can in some scenarios, and they want the best technology they can get into it. Now, if Apple wants to take a step up from that, the most obvious thing for them is to add an OLED panel. Now, there will be a price hike, but if you think about it, the iPad Pro is expensive as it is, but if you use it for professional purposes, then paying the extra money for a better display, for deep blacks, for better contrast, for higher dynamic range, it might be worth it. And it seems like that could be Apple's next move, because OLED panels are very expensive to produce, but they get more expensive as the size of the panel increases, as you would. Now, it's entirely plausible that Apple would do this in one of two ways. They could just have the iPad Pro model with OLED and then the iPad Air, but that would leave a massive price gap in between. So what Apple could do is have the iPad Air, then the iPad Pro without OLED, and then a higher spec version of the iPad Pro with OLED. So that could be just more RAM, more storage for that model. Now, another era is the MacBook Pro. So the current generation has had its design for 4 years. So it's 4 years old, it's due for a refresh. Now, Apple did release a new version of it this year with an updated keyboard and improved internals. By that, I don't mean improved thermal designs or cooling systems, improved CPUs, so the latest Core i9, Core i7, Core i5 CPUs. But that still has the cooling performance issues that the previous years have had. Now, what Apple is likely to do is to redo the internals and the external, but have a better display, because every year that they release a new model of anything, they have a better display. Now, that could just be 40% brighter this, 25% more color in this, and so many other figures. Now, because OLED panels have got so much better in recent years, they don't suffer from burn-in as much, and they're cheaper to produce. And as we see this year, the market trend has gone, in laptop terms, to adding OLED panels for premium laptops. So Razer has added an OLED version of the Razer Blade 15. Dell recently this week announced that the XPS 15 will come with an OLED option. So it's entirely plausible that Apple will add an OLED panel to the refreshed MacBook Pros. Now, Apple has many ways they could implement this. They could have it as just the premium line MacBook, so maybe just the MacBook Pro 15-inch would have an option with the OLED panel, just like the MacBook Pro 13 at the moment has the option for without the touch bar. And maybe they would implement a different type of touch bar with an OLED panel, so similar to the Asus ZenBook that we've seen with two displays. Maybe Apple would have a thicker touch bar area, which is built with OLED technology in all of its MacBook Pros. But maybe it's not any of those. Maybe it's not the iPad Pro, and maybe it's not the MacBook Pro that's going to get OLED anytime soon. Maybe that'll happen in a few years' time. Maybe soon Apple will release an iPhone XS or XR, a budget version of their flagship iPhone with an OLED panel. Now, that is plausible because Apple could just reuse the display designs that they've created for the iPhone XS in the next version of the XR, and that would save them some money in the R&D sector. But we don't know what's going to happen, at least until September or October when the iPhone event is, and possibly before or after that they will have a separate event for a MacBook Pro or an iPad Pro. But until then, who knows. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any other thoughts that I haven't covered in this video, let me know. If you think Apple may release a new version of a different device, maybe they're going to have a new product line instead, let me know. Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, subscribe for future content, and yeah, ciao.